It's Melanie here with Vintage Hill Studio. I have a graduation card for you this week. It's called Caps in the Air, and this is it. It is a very simple card using these Gen Craft graduation sentiment stamps I found on Amazon, as well as this little stencil from My Favorite Things. It is a cloud stencil, so let's jump right into it. I'll be using my Tonic Studio's stamping platform to get a good image here of these hands. These are just the arms and hands throwing the caps in the air, so it is so cute and so simple to color. This card comes together so quickly. I think you'll really like this. So I just get that stamped down very well, and then I will move on to the caps, getting those just up in the air. There's enough in the stamp set to match each hand. So 5 caps of different sizes and 5 hands. Makes it really easy to get your stamping done, so you don't have to move those caps around with a stamping block or anything like that. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is add the sentiments. So this stamp set has sentiments and all these great little images. The mortarboard hats, the hands, some diplomas, several sentiments in the stamp set. It is just a wonderful set. Again, that was from Gen Craft on Amazon. All right, now I have used this stamp set before and I created myself some masks. So the reason you want to use mask is to protect the area underneath it. So what you do is stamp your images on some post-it notes that have a sticky background to them, and then you simply fussy cut them out with your scissors. So I've already made my mask. You can see I have one for each of these mortarboard caps, and then I also have a larger mask for the hands. All right, I'll get that put down, and the reason I'm going to use these masks is because I'm going to bring over that My Favorite Things cloud stencil and ink the background so it looks as if I have a blue sky behind the hands and the caps. So I'm bringing over my Distress ink and tumbled glass and a little blender brush, and then I will simply use this cloud stencil. Now I love this stencil. What you do with this is just rotate it. Just rotate it to get a different row of clouds going. You see the different shapes here on each side. It gives you a wonderful background, and you can see the background can be done very, very quickly here. So graduation season is upon us already. Can you believe that? We went through Easter and now we're jumping right on into the graduation. Such a wonderful time for all these young folks, starting with their new lives and chasing their dreams. Best of luck to everyone, all the graduates, high school, college, kindergarten graduates. So many dreams, so much future ahead of them. All right, so you can see that you can color right over these masks. That's what I'm doing with this blending brush. I'm going right over the mask, and the area underneath, again, will be protected so that when I go back to color these with my markers, it's going to be as if they were not touched, which they weren't. That's what the mask does for you. So if you're ever going to do your own background like this, you might want to consider using masks. Just thought I'd explain that to you very quickly. Now you see as I remove those, clean underneath, even though I was able to use my ink right up and over it. So it puts your images in the foreground of your inked background. There we go. Ready to move on with our coloring. So again, I am using whatever markers I have on hand. I am not really dedicated to one brand or another. I just use whatever I have. You don't have to use all of the same things all the time. You know, like the same brand of markers. If you've got several markers, use what you have. Don't be so particular about having everything matchy-matchy or the same brands or anything like that. Okay, some of these have a fine tip on them, and that comes in very handy for these tiny fingers at the top of each one of these hands. So that is one good thing. I like the brush end markers, and I also like the fine tip. I hardly ever use a chisel edged marker, so I'm not a real big proponent on buying any markers with the chisel end on it. I just don't use it that much. But the brush end and the fine nib, yes, definitely. And you can see where that does come in handy on tiny details like this. Okay, I'm almost done here with all of these hands. Then I will move on to the gowns, the sleeves of the gowns. So here is one trick that I'd like to share with you. Oops, excuse me, it was not the gowns, it's the tassels. This is just a light yellow, and then I'll come back with a darker yellow and shade just the bottom side of the tassels. It's not really much coloring to do right there. Again, using the fine end nib of this pen for those tiny little spots on the top of the mortar boards. Then adding a little shading at the bottom side of the tassels, and that will be it for the tassels. Okay, now here's the tip that I wanted to share with you. Anytime I'm coloring an image that is presumably black in shade, I like to use a gray. And I'll use two shades of gray. I've got a light gray and a little darker gray. And the reason I do that is because if you color it in with black, you're not going to be able to add any type of shading. And you can see the shading makes the details of these gowns really stand out. So you'll see that when I get to the shading part here. Okay, it's still very simple. I've only got two shades of gray here, the lighter and the darker, and here I come in with my shading. Now again, if I were to color these sleeves in just black, the only option I would have would be to add maybe some white highlights. That's the only way I'm going to get any depth and dimension to these sleeves, is if I color it in black and use white highlights, or conversely, you can color it in the two shades of gray. Get your base coat down and then add your shading with the darker shade of gray. So just FYI, if you're ever, perplexed about using black for an image, think about bringing in your grays. You get the idea that it is a black shade, but you're able to add more dimension with the grays. Okay, moving on. I'm just going to do one of these mortar boards to show you how I did that in the same exact colors that I used on the gowns, and able to add just a little bit of shading. And I'll give you a closer look at that. See how that comes out? And you get the gist that they are black. So there you go. That's my tip for the day that I'm going to share with you. That finishes my panel. Now my card base this week is 5 inches by 7 inches, and I thought I would add a little bit of interest by using an embossing folder. All the supplies and dimensions used for today's card will be listed down in the description below the YouTube video. So if you're interested, just scroll on down there and look at that. So my panel was looking a little plain still, and I didn't want to add another color like for the mat behind it, so I decided to bring over my mini scoring board. This is a We Are Memories mini scoreboard, and I'm just going to flip my panel over and use my scoring tool and that very first line, and I'm going to just go around all the edges of my panel, and this will give me a nice little debossed frame. It's just enough to really set it off from that background and give it just enough dimension to make it interesting. So then when I'm ready to get this put down, I glued my mat onto the front of my card, and then I'm using foam tape behind my colored panel here, and I'll get that put down. Okay, so you can see how quickly this card came together. Thank you so much for dropping by today. I am so happy to see you every week. To my followers, thank you so much. I love the comments. I'd love to have a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, look down here in the right-hand corner. I have a little subscribe button for YouTube, or you can subscribe from the subscribe down by next to my name, Vintage Hill Studios. Thank you for stopping by, and I hope to see you again next week. Happy crafting, everyone.